So funny thing happened. I initially planned on having today's video be the one that focuses on How I Met Your Mother, season 2, episode 11, titled How Lily Stole Christmas. Because yes, I had thoughts about how good it felt to have my theory confirmed about Ted still being angry with Lily with regards her leaving and what the events of the episode say about her and her characterization. And I do intend to come back to that in next week's video, so you can look forward to that. But then my mind came drifting back to episode 7 titled Swally, or as I like to think of it in my head, the Crazy Eyes episode, because every time I tried to move on from it to other things, my mind just kept getting stuck in the events of it, the premise of it, and what it has to say about the connections between this group of friends, the judgment they extend to others, and the grace they give themselves, and how that in turn is more than enough to turn any sane person a little crazy. Yes, people, I do think that Chloe was justified in her actions. I probably would have done the same or something similar, and I would like to talk about it. Because, yes, this is an episode that sticks to you for better or for worse. And I say so because this episode has an 8.9 IMDb rating, which puts it at very close to great. And over 6,000 people voted on that. But before I get into the weeds of the video, hello, I'm Nori and welcome to my channel. If this is your first time finding me, I am currently doing my first time ever watch of How I Met Your Mother, and thus I am making a series of videos as I go along, sharing my thoughts on happenings and the characters, sometimes with predictions of how their actions would go in later episodes, and sometimes just because I'm trying to understand what makes them tick. If you haven't seen any of my videos before, I do have a playlist for How I Met Your Mother, so you can have an idea of what this entire process has been like for me. All I ask, of course, is that please be considerate about spoilers. Although this video is talking about the Swally episode, like I mentioned earlier, I did make it to season 2, episode 11, which focuses on Christmas time with the gang and how Lily stole Christmas. So just take note of where I am and please don't put spoilers beyond that point. Or if you want to, a ton of asterisks and a spoiler ahead heads up, so I would have to click to read more to get to the spoilery bits, would do wonders. I would also have timestamps in the video for those who want to skip the synopsis portion and just go straight to my thoughts. And with that said, let's move on to the synopsis for the episode. Swally opens with Barney, Marshall, and Ted at a coffee shop. They are quiet for a long moment, trying to take it all in before they all conclude that being at the bar beats being at a coffee shop easily. It's an experience they never want to repeat again, particularly Barney, although Marshall isn't quite in agreement because the cute barrister at the stand, who is played by the always stunning Monica Baccarin, keeps laughing at his boring ass jokes, and Ted and Barney are in agreement that it is very clear that she's doing so because she likes him. We get a flashback to their interaction so we, the audience, can have that moment of agreement with Ted and Barney because that joke most certainly doesn't warrant all that laughter. And of course, their stance is confirmed when they notice that Chloe had drawn a heart beside Marshall's name on his order to indicate her interest, whilst Ted didn't have a heart besides his, and Barney had been rechristened Swally. It is this new name that becomes a side plot of a running gag for Barney throughout the episode, where his friends proceed to tease him by calling him Swally every moment they get, placing calls in public spaces so his name can be shouted across the room, doing shout outs to him on the radio where they ask the presenter to urge him to accept that Barney is gone and never coming back, and so Swally needs to learn to be at peace with that. Someone even taped a "Call Me Swally" at the back of his jacket like they're kindergartners or something. It's done for laughs, and considering the plethora of things that Barney himself has done for the sake of laughs, remember Mary the paralegal? I could understand why they all jumped at the chance to call him Swally. But back to Marshall. After much convincing from Ted, who keeps urging him to try his luck and ask Chloe out, which Marshall is convinced he failed at and she didn't hear him, they notice that Chloe wrote her phone number on his order, confirming that yes, she would go out on a date with him. And thus, Marshall secured himself a date. Information that Ted immediately heads over to Robin's to break the news to her, and whilst doing so, Lily shows up to invite them all for a housewarming party that she's throwing, Marshall inclusive. But that is when Ted tells her that Marshall would most likely not be able to make it as he has a date that night. Lily sounds like she's fine with it. Spoiler alert, she really isn't. Anyway, Marshall and Chloe hang out for their date and eventually make their way over to McLaren's where Barney and Ted are hanging out for the night, as they always do. Marshall is thrilled at having scored a girl like Chloe, and when she briefly excuses herself from the table, Barney and Ted both urge Marshall to break up with her immediately, citing that Chloe has what they call crazy eyes, which they interpret to mean that sixth sense that points out that the woman they are with might just be cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And both Barney and Ted have examples to spare of how ignoring the signs did come back to bite them in the ass when they really did confirm that said women had crazy eyes. I keep putting the term crazy eyes in inverted commas for a reason, and I'll go into that by the time I'm sharing my thoughts. Anyway, Marshall isn't buying it and insists that he cannot see a speck of crazy in Chloe's eyes. And even though Ted points out that that is because Marshall's judgment is clouded, what with him not having gotten laid in months, Marshall refuses to budge and continues to see Chloe, until her frequent calls pull him out of a test he was about to take, where she mentions to him that she's being followed by a creepy guy with a hunchback who keeps calling out to her as he limps towards her, and she tells him that she is scared. As we can expect, Ted and Barney don't believe this at all. They believe that this is all a ploy, and the seed is planted in Marshall to consider if maybe Chloe really does have crazy eyes after all. Later that night, after their date, Marshall leads Chloe into the apartment and goes to get her a beer when he hears something crash to the floor whilst he's in the kitchen. He asks her what the sound was, and Chloe mentions that, she dropped her keys. Except by the time he comes out, he notices that the picture of he and Lily was smashed on the ground, and immediately, and honestly, logically, at the time at least, had the thought that Chloe was responsible and tries observing her eyes to see if he can see the crazy eyes that Barney and Ted were so certain of. They eventually start to lean into each other to kiss, and then out pops Lily, who tries to put a stop to it, confirming that she had been hiding in the room all along. We then go back to earlier in the story when Lily tells Ted and Robin that she's perfectly fine with Marshall dating again. Turns out that was all a lie, as when she's alone with Robin, she admits the truth, that she doesn't want Marshall dating anyone else, and now that she knows he's about to go on a date, that's all she can think about, which is why she wants to go check Chloe out, hoping that she isn't a bombshell, which would just make everything worse. And of course, all I thought in this scene was, baby, it's Monica Baccarin. Gorgeous is all she knows and all that she is. Lily, however, doesn't know that yet and arrives at the coffee shop only to be informed that Chloe just left and that she was holding a pink umbrella. This then causes Lily to run after her, cover herself with her jacket as she stoops her back to bear the weight she's carrying, and as she tries to get a good look at Chloe's face, she accidentally injures herself, forcing herself to have a temporary limp. And if you're thinking, this sounds kind of familiar. Well, it's because a hunched over limping Lily, who lowered her voice to prevent this absolute stranger from recognizing her, was the weird, creepy person that Chloe had told Marshall was following her earlier, the tale that Barney and Ted had written off as being a lie and a sign of just how big her crazy eyes were, whilst Marshall was starting to buy into the narrative. Plus, the framed photograph of Marshall and Lily that Marshall thought Chloe threw on the ground, turns out it was all Lily's doing, as she had come in a bit earlier and was looking for a place to hide so Marshall and Chloe wouldn't see her, and thus accidentally pushed over the framed photograph and broke it. Lily starts to cry as she rushes out of the apartment. Marshall follows after her, leaving his date behind as he tries to figure out what is wrong, which is when Lily blots out everything that had happened and is horrified at her actions, whilst Marshall realizes that Chloe wasn't crazy after all. She's perfectly normal. The one who is best suited to be called crazy, however, is Lily. But it does so with this utter look of devotion and love, as it states that she has way crazier eyes, and when Lily tries to send him back, he doesn't budge and instead kisses her on the steps and she kisses him back. And that is where they are when Ted and Barney stumble upon them at the same spot where Marshall had sat with a broken heart. He was now back with the girl he loves. Afterwards, they all head to McLaren's with Robin as well and have a swell time just chatting and drinking. And when they are done and make their way back to the apartment, it is to find the place all turned upside down with Chloe still seated. Because yes, these doofuses left her alone in the apartment for a large portion of the night as Marshall and Lily reunited and they all went out to celebrate. When they look stunned at the destruction, Chloe mentions that she was looking for her keys, which Marshall points out were right in front of her on the coffee table. She grabs them and leaves, but not before saying goodbye to everyone and calling Robin Roland. Barney tries to make Roland a thing so that they would all stop calling him Swally. It doesn't work. The end. Like I stated in the title of this video, Swally as an episode for me is interesting because on one hand, it does have amazing moments. I kept chuckling at the Swally bit because even though it did get a bit on the nerves and was dragged on for a long ass time, I am of the opinion that Barney, who is big on appearances and trying to look suave in front of everyone, who likes to be the one with the last laugh, being teased by his friends for the entirety of this episode was actually funny to me with its comeuppance. But at the same time, it had the parts that grated on my nerves, specifically because this is the episode, unlike any other, that took its time to really highlight the hypocrisy present within these characters. Because I will state right out of the bat that the one phrase that gets to me is when someone says something about a woman acting overly emotional or being crazy, because usually I tend to ask if she really is crazy or if certain circumstances were what pushed her to that point, whereby the person who did get her to said point is then allowed to look all pristine and proper and calm when clearly they had aggravated the situation to that extent. And Swally as an episode shows this very clearly. But I will come back to that shortly. Let's first look at the hypocrisy of the friend group. And like I stated at the beginning of the video, the judgment they give to others and the grace they extend only to themselves. I mean, at the start, Marshall is happy to be with this girl. Like, sure, his jokes weren't that funny, but who hasn't laughed that way to try and signify interest in someone you hope is getting the transmission that you are interested in them? Everything is going well. I mean, they just met after all, and yet the first time he actually introduces her to Ted and Barney, the two of them, after a glance at her, immediately state that she has crazy eyes, which is a dog whistle, mind you, that is meant to immediately convey to Marshall and we the audience that is about to be subjected to some irrational behavior from this woman in the future should their relationship continue. Ted and Barney go on and on about being able to read the signs, that it is immediately there and that the best course of action when it pops up is to stay far away and not be blinded by anything else to keep going. And yet, by the end of the episode, all I kept thinking was, how on earth did you both miss the fact that Lily Aldrin is just as cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs? Is it because they are blinded by their friendship with her, which makes them easily forgive all wrongs and indiscretion? Yes, because you see, them having known Lily for years, Marshall having been in love with Lily for years, means that they have spent sufficient time with her to be able to know what her behavior is like when she's not feeling threatened within her relationship and has not taken to stalking a potential rival for love. To them, outside of that, Lily is normal. Now, some could argue that, is she really though? I mean, an actual adult woman who carries out Aldrin justice outside of her classroom does not really scream normalcy, does it? But they, and we can extend her grace because of what led to her actions, Lily's terror at the thought of losing Marshall, of Marshall possibly falling in love with someone new, which would forever close any potential she might have with him, is what leads her to act out. And whilst that is classified as crazy behavior, it is one that is seen, loved, and adored. Chloe's actions, however, aren't read quite the same, which is interesting to me because it speaks really to the double standards inherent within the show. Now, I already mentioned it in the video I did about Mary the Paralegal, that the show tends to turn Lily and Robin into one of the boys, whereby they are treated and judged separately from the other women that show up, and neither of them ever speak out to the mistreatment of said women because Lily and Robin are effectively one of and with the boys. And this we see repeating itself with Chloe in this episode, because I am sure that there are people who saw the end of Swally and immediately did that pointing to the screen thing of, see, crazy eyes, Ted and Barney were totally right. But before you start crowing about it, I would like for us to take a couple of steps back and imagine things from the perspective of Chloe, which I know is hard. She isn't part of the main cast, and just as what happens with a lot of the other women that we've gotten so far, she is treated as disposable once she's served her purpose. And her purpose in this case is to be the catalyst that gets Marshall and Lily back together. But either way, though, I will like for us to take a couple of steps back and see this through her otherwise crazy eyes, right? So, she's headed home from work and is being followed by this weird-ass person who kept calling her name and tailing her as they limped towards her to the point that she was so terrified, so she called Marshall for help. Then she and Marshall go to his place for their second date. She accidentally drops her keys and Marshall shows up afterwards accusing her out of the blues of having broken the frame with the photograph of him and his ex-fiancée in it, only for said ex-fiancé to pop up between them just as they were about to kiss, and then she runs away crying and is immediately followed by Marshall, this man that Chloe is meant to be on a date with. And there she sits for hours waiting as the realization sinks that her date left her alone in his apartment to go comfort his crying ex-fiancé who didn't want them kissing each other, and he had been gone for hours. Even someone with the patience of a saint, with the eyes of an angel, would lash out in that scene, and yet the show keeps it nebulous, tries to subtly hint at us that Barney and Ted were right, that Chloe did have crazy eyes, and in so doing utterly absorbs Marshall, and I'm only mentioning Marshall here because he is the one she was on a date with, not Lily. The entire sequence of events was written that way to absorb Marshall of any blame, so that what he does is give a sigh of relief that he locked out of being with this crazy woman. And I repeat, I hate that. Because like I said earlier, it's often a case of, is she really crazy or was she pushed to that point? Now, some of you might say that her trashing the apartment wasn't justified and she could have just left, which fair. She could have just left. But at the same time, what if she thought she couldn't leave? What if she was waiting and kept waiting for Marshall, wondering how he was going to get back into his apartment if she just up and left it? I mean, he didn't grab his keys. And all that time was enough for that rage at being ignored to percolate. But more importantly, the show lost that leg to stand on the minute we saw the highlight of Lily's actions and realized that she is also absolutely bonkers. And that Marshall loves her because of that, regardless. And at the same time, we are meant to consider that if Marshall can see it, and this is the Marshall that was established as being not able to read crazy eyes, then how on earth did that sail by Barney and Ted all these years that Lily has had the very same tendencies and that they have known her? It all boils down to the fact that the crazy eyes women partnered with them, and they are the ones telling the story of how things went with said women. We have zero idea if the story would be the exact same thing, told the exact same way, where it's being told from the mouths of the women actually involved. But the show doesn't want us to care about that. It is operatively clearly from a state of different rules applied to me than they do to you. And it makes me curious for what is to come in the latter seasons, because this episode helps to establish that the core of what is at the dynamic of this group of friends is an unfairness with regards to others, because even if they did the exact same thing, committed the exact same wrong as someone else, their actions will be received with way more love and way more grace than they would extend to others. But at the same time, I can't really see myself blaming them for that. Because ultimately, that is human behavior, isn't it? We would always, isn't it? We would always operate from a different rules for me than for you belief system. I just think Chloe deserved better. Of course, this is just me and my thoughts. I would as always love to hear yours. Do you agree with me? Disagree with me? Do you think Chloe really did have crazy eyes, or was it just Barney and Ted talking out of their ass? Does the way she had her walkout scene at the end of the episode indicate that they were justified in their initial assessment, or had she been pushed to that point by Marshall and everything that happened that night? Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like this video if you've watched this far and haven't done so yet. Share this if you want. Support me on Patreon if you can. If you can't, however, do consider checking out my other channels. One of them is my gaming channel and the other is my ASMR content. I have both links in the description bar if they sound like something you might want to check out. Whichever the case may be, however, I will see you tomorrow with a new video. Until then, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.